Absolute Braniac has surfaced in the background of Absolute Superman, but today we uncover his origin story. Today we continue Absolute Superman with issue number 7 by Jason Aaron. The team of Omega men descend into the hidden facility somewhere in the Nevada desert. They lower themselves into the darkness, preparing their weapons as they sync their cortexes with their combat suits. Weapons raised, they move through the shadows, slipping past strange technology and purple mist that clings along the floor. No signs of life. Facility appears deserted. The kind of power this place draws from the grid. They must be concealing something here. Something massive. But if it's the server cluster that runs the Braniac algorithm, there's no way Lazarus would leave this place unprotected. So stay alert. The team leader thinks to the others as they advance forward. But suddenly, there is a burst of energy, and one of the agents collapses to the ground, writhing in agony as his skin seems to be stripped from his body. What the hell was that? What just happened to Call? One of the agents thinks as they take cover. But a new voice in their head responds. Why? I shrank his skin, of course, the voice tells them. The team leader raises his weapon, ready to fire. He glances back at his other agents, but they're already dropping to the ground. One starts screaming that they can't feel their muscles anymore, while the other's bones have shrunken his body, and he is vomiting them up in a pool of viscera. The team leader turns and runs, firing wildly into the darkness. Omega Strike Force to base. Immediate evac needed. Primus, do you copy? The team leader shouts, but his hand suddenly enlarges and the rifle clatters to the ground. He topples to the floor under the weight. She. Now clear your thoughts. Relax that luscious brain of yours. I'll take it from here. The voice thinks as Braniac steps from the darkness, his body held together by machines. And the team leader lets out a scream of fear and pain. Later, the team leader is sustained by machines as Braniac prods at his body, examining his biology. The body shifts, and the man struggles to open his mouth, his brain suspended in a jar nearby. I wouldn't advise wiggling in your addition. I tend to tinker when I'm feeling anxious, Braniac says as he steps forward. He glances back at his monitors and scowls at the images of the so-called Superman. He can't solve it, can't determine where he comes from, how he is capable of what he can do. Braniac roars in rage and frustration and grabs one of the nearby shrunken cities, rattling the glass and demanding the scientists inside provide him the answers he seeks. Tell me who he is. Who is Superman? Braniac bellows. But the tiny scientists don't know. We know nothing, oh mighty Braniac. Please, please don't. They shout, but Braniac spins and hurls the glass onto the ground. He steps on the city with an angry roar. Maggots, morons, he yells as he begins crushing the beings as if they were insects. Braniac breathes deeply and collects himself before turning back to the shattered tactical agent. My apologies. I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm afraid I can lose my mind a bit when I'm angry, Braniac says as he reaches up and pokes at his exposed brain tissue, explaining that he's tried to cut away the parts of his brain that lead to anger, but has been unsuccessful so far. He turns back to the surgical table and sits on the ground, admitting that having someone to speak to might help him work through the problem. Braniac closes his eyes and thinks back to the past. Many years earlier, Braniac first opened his eyes. He stepped from his pod and looked at another Braniac that stood before him. You are Braniac 419,732. You serve the collective. What is the collective? Braniac asks. But the older man waves a hand dismissively and explains that he is not permitted to seek knowledge beyond his station. He says, as he hands Braniac a shovel, motions to a furnace and a nearby pile of dead Braniacs, explaining that Braniac 419,732's job is to shovel the refuge into the liquidator. Begin shoveling 419,732. You are already behind schedule, the older Braniac states before walking out of the room. and so Braniac began shoveling the dead bodies into the liquidator. The bodies never ended. The ceiling would open and a chute would deposit more. It was on day 2844 that Braniac discovered that someone wasn't dead. A murderous Braniac tore free of the pile, trying to drive a knife into Braniac's head. Wait, I serve the collective. What is your function? I am Braniac 8,238,759. I stab. I kill, the murderer declares as he prepares to stab again. But Braniac manages to push him away and grabs his fallen shovel, slamming it hard into the murderer's head and cutting it off. I am Braniac 419,732. I shovel, he states simply before throwing the body into the liquidator. Day 13,638. Braniac continues to shovel, his body is ravaged, cuts and broken limbs expose his blood and brains, but he presses onward. Day 49.91. Braniac stands ready, but the room is empty. He rests calmly on his shovel, but the ceiling does not open. No more refuge is brought into the room. Finally, he walks to the door. The one that the older Braniac walked out of all those years ago. Hello? Is anyone there? There hasn't been any refuse in a long while. Should I? He begins to call, but there's no answer. Finally, he wedges his shovel into the door and pries it open, revealing an empty corridor. Braniac moves ahead, passing strange technology in small cities trapped in bottles. More Braniac bodies stored in pods. Finally, Braniac arrives on the bridge, where he finds the older Braniac dead. Oh my. Are you Braniac 1? He whispers, but there is no answer. He walks forward to see the lifeless Braniac slumped in the chair. No, you are more Refu, Braniac says as he looks up out of the windows and stares at the stars as they pass by. He smiles slowly. I am Braniac. I am Braniac, he shouts with joy. That was the day that he was promoted to level 100 Hector Braniac 1, the one where he allowed himself the knowledge of the other Braniacs. And Braniac admits that he wondered what else was out in the universe beyond the stars. In the present, Braniac stands over the Omega agent. I've sometimes paused to consider the possibility that it would have been better for everyone, me included, if I'd stayed in that room with the shovel. But where would the fun in that be? Braniac tells the man. He leans over him, thanking him for helping him work through his anger. Contact the Braniac Collective. Braniac orders his computer as he turns away. The screens switch and light up, revealing the faces of other Braniacs around the universe. Braniac uploads the information that he has gathered and requests any and all possible leads related to Superman's identity and/or planet of origin. The other Braniacs study his reports, but are shocked by what they see, calling the reports idiocy, and that no species has the abilities described. One by one, they sign off. Until one speaks up. Krypton, a planet in the Rho sector. Your dust sample matches Krypton's thermal signature. The female Braniac states, informing Braniac 419,732 that the world was destroyed and there were no survivors. But this Braniac did recently visit the former site of Krypton, where I retrieved samples of its remains. They display a rather virulent range of radioactivity, now transmitting the sample's elemental composition, the female Braniac says. She begins to inquire about the identity of the Braniac that called this meeting, but Braniac ends the transmission. Braniac turns back to his machines as they begin to synthesize a piece of Krypton that matches the specifications sent by the other Braniac. And he smiles as a plan begins to form. I have work to do, he whispers to himself. Later, he stands before a table where his machines are working on Peacemaker Smith. He is an alien, not even of this world. Tell me, Peacemaker Smith, how does that make you feel? Braniac asks. But Smith merely screams in pain as the machines continue to work. He doesn't understand, questioning why he is being punished. Just kill me already, he begs. But Braniac steps from the shadows and smiles. Quite the contrary, Peacemaker. Director Al Ghul was very impressed with your work in the field. You're being trusted with a very special deployment to what is soon to be the most dangerous war zone on the planet. A place called Kansas, Braniac whispers to him. He turns away and stares at the war suit that he has developed and smiles. And that concludes the origin of this absolute Braniac and sets us up for the next arc in Jason Aaron's Absolute Superman. Things are getting pretty intense, but I want to know your thoughts on this version of Braniac in the comments below. And like and subscribe if you haven't already, as it really helps out the channel. And be sure to click that bell icon, as it gets you notifications when new videos go live.